Hello audience, Mr. Z here with What If World War II Ended in Stalemate, Part 3. Parts 1 and 2 of which you can check out in the annotations above. Spoilers ahead. Last time on the channel, Germany had managed to negotiate for peace with Britain and the Allies at the expense of the USSR, who would lose a fair deal of territory in the peace treaty. The USSR would rapidly remilitarize and proceed to continue expanding in the east, instigating conflicts with Britain, Germany, and Japan, while at the same time successfully sponsoring a communist revolution within Mexico, earning it the ire of the United States, who would annex Panama and Costa Rica to secure them from the Union of Central American Socialist Republics. The Soviets developed nuclear weapons and are now locked in numerous proxy wars with the British in India, the Japanese in China, and the Germans in the Ukraine, as well as various other proxy wars within Africa and the Middle East. The Franco-British Empire would be established but would still find itself strained across the world, and thus aid in the establishment of the Neo-Persian Empire, a new superpower whose location support may just be enough to finally turn the tides in Asia, while an alliance is drawn up between Germany and the US for a joint invasion of the enemies now at their doorsteps. Following increased belligerence between the US and Mexico, the US would finally be able to justify a war with the UCASR after an invasion of the recently annexed state of Great Panama. The US would launch a sea invasion from the Caribbean with Cuba at the helm, a northward push out of Panama, and a downward push from Texas. Germany, after facing increased tensions along their border with the USSR, would invade the Soviets' African proxy state from their colonies in Africa, with support from American Liberia. The Franco-British Empire would, just as they had with Persia, facilitate the establishment of the United Caliphates of North Africa, doing so with the support of numerous Islamic refugees fleeing the secular persecution of the Soviet Union in the Near East. The United Caliphates, Persia, and Japan enter into a threefold alliance to drive the communists out of Asia and reassert dominance in the region. A successful push is launched up into the Caucasus Mountains and into Arabia, but communist China and India hold their borders and refuse to budge even an inch. Tensions flare along the German-Soviet border as it seems direct conflict is inevitable. The German government holds the upper hand, knowing that if it came to the nuclear option, they could easily strike the Soviet capital, while the Soviets couldn't so easily strike the German capital. Thus, troops are mobilized for an immediate blitzkrieg. Mexico falls nearly under full American occupation, while numerous rebel groups emerge and various communist refugees flee into the US. The United Caliphates, aided by countless revolts within the Soviet Arabian sphere, take back the whole of the Arabian Peninsula. Persia and Japan are leading an upward push into the USSR from the far east and far west, stretching the Soviet forces thin and forcing them to evaluate the outcome of a nuclear strike against any of the invading forces. In terms of capability, the Soviets don't have the means to effectively strike both Germany and Japan, nor the Persian capital, and they certainly wouldn't have the capability to strike all three. Mutually assured destruction isn't exactly a matter, as the arsenals of each nation vary greatly, as well as the range and payload. Germany's nuclear arsenal was far more capable of wiping out Moscow, while striking of Berlin might stretch Soviet capabilities too far. Thus, Germany wouldn't be an ideal target and would need to be dealt with using conventional methods. Japan was much too far to justify a strike against unless such a thing was carried out from communist China, but that would require the construction of a new launch site and thus make it inefficient. Persia would only have a fledgling nuclear program and would be incapable of retaliating, but any significant targets, notably their capital, would be increasingly out of range. The Soviets would soon see the German and Persian armies racing to capture Moscow, while the Japanese occupied eastern Soviet ports. As it became clear the war was lost, the Soviets would, in a classic display of Russian scorched earth policy, detonate nuclear weapons across their own western border, wiping out the German and Persian forces, giving themselves time to flee past the Ural Mountains, leaving a second deployment of German soldiers to capture what remained of western Russia, dividing the territory up with the Persian army as things finally settled in the post-war period. The remnant Soviet government would, with the support of like-minded communists in China and India, establish the new Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, stretching all the way from Siberia down to Sri Lanka, a massive but contained communist force, surrounded on all sides by enemies. Persia's northmost territories would break off and become an independent republic. Persia would accept this, understanding that it would prevent further conflicts from arising within its own borders. Japan and Germany would have essentially landlocked the NUSSR by leaving it only the icy water ports to the Arctic and the small peninsula of Kamchatka. The Franco-British Union would continue to oversee its Commonwealth following the war, further developing its holdings in South Africa, while the US began reconstructing Mexico and American Liberia. The US during this period would need to crack down on various communist factions growing within their own borders following the war. An Islamic Republic would be established with Arabia and incorporated into the United Caliphates. Japan and Germany would place a heavy emphasis on strengthening their border against the Soviets and continuing what would become a second arms race between them and the NUSSR. The US of Z, thanks you for watching. Support your legion by liking the video or join our ranks by subscribing for more. Mr. Z, out.